I can't shoot street photography where I live because my city is just so boring. I need to travel to explore exotic places to be able to shoot more. That's something I thought some time ago about my photography. What's up, photography fans? Welcome back to All About Street Photography channel. Today I would like to challenge this with an example of one of the world's most famous and successful documentary photographers who defies that idea and will inspire you to more explore your neighborhood. Let's talk about Martin Parr. Martin Parr is one of the world's most famous and successful documentary photographers, featured in more than 80 exhibitions with more than 80 photo books published. His work covers topics such as mass tourism, consumerism, or lifestyle. Brightly lit and color-saturated images, often funny, interesting, or even exaggerated, are trademarks of Parr's style. Parr was born in 1952 in England. He started to be interested in photography during his teenage years. His grandfather was an amateur photographer and lent him a camera when they went out shooting together. In the 70s, Parr was shooting black and white with 35mm Leica M3. In the 80s, he used a lot medium format and onboard flash, and switched to digital in mid-2000s. In 2006, he got his first small digital Sony camera and later Canon 5D. During his school years, he shot photo stories for the school magazine and learned in the darkroom. He was accepted to full-time photography courses at Manchester Polytechnic, which were 3 very important years for his career and skills. Parr was introduced to contemporary photography by his craft teacher at grammar school. A big inspiration was also Creative Camera magazine, which featured a lot of contemporary photographers like Lee Friedlander or Cartier-Bresson. But it wasn't all that easy. It's important to understand that fine art photography wasn't something respected that well inside the art circles back then. Unlike today, when we have so many opportunities to visit galleries and photography shows, and even though Museum of Modern Art established the Department of Photography in the 30s in New York, the UK museums and our establishment didn't like its presence and saw it as a populist move. When thinking about documentary photographers, I usually have a pretty clear idea what social issue, conflict or war the photographer should be covering. However, Parr's main subject has been leisure for almost 50 years of his career. What he likes about photographing people during leisure is that during the free time people have, they do what they like, and it kind of defines the society and who are the people within that society. As you know, if you follow my Instagram and other videos, I love color street photography, but when we look at the great photography masters, vast majority of them used black and white while shooting fine art, but also documentary photography. Now, this was because A, the film was not available, and B, it was expensive. However, even when it became more accessible, a lot of photographers still opted not to use it. Parr already shot color film for the Home Sweet Home project in the early 70s and fully transitioned to color in 1982. He was using mostly Fuji 400 Superior and Agfa Ultra, which resulted into bright colors his photographs are known for. In his own words, his attitude is to show the good and the bad side of contemporary life. When I'm out shooting, it is a bit like a soap opera. I identify the places where I want to photograph, and then I wait for the right characters to fall into place, he said. What I would say is a lot of conflicts and issues originate based on absence of something. It can be because of money, rights, injustice, and so on. What I like about Parr's photography is that he covers the other extreme, having too much money or too much free time. His photographs are in a great contrast what you see when you look at your favorite news website. I think it is great to document such common things like beach life or dog shows, because when the future generations will look into archives, they will not only see the war photography, social issues, or selfies from Instagram, but also a common life, sometimes funny, sometimes real, but unstaged view of Parr's perception of reality. Unlike the old masters and their photographs, which many people call timeless, Parr's photographs are definitely not timeless. They are very much dated, but it is not necessarily a bad thing. It is, for example, the reason Parr was able to code changes in Britain pretty accurately. Parr was influenced by many famous photographers such as Anne Cartier-Bresson, Bill Brandt, Robert Frank, or Gary Winogrand. However, the biggest inspiration probably comes from works of Tony Ray Jones, who was also a documentary photographer from England, mostly focusing on festivals and leisure activities with surreal humor. Which is also the theme of Parr's colorful photographs. When we talk about color, Parr actually does not post-process his own images. Not that the images are not processed at all, but he does not do it himself. He explains that in the interview for Canon Europe. I have never processed a file in my life. I just know that when I look at the pictures, they look right. Louis, who does that work for me, knows my palette inside out. He knows what I like, how I want them printed, so it's very rare that I say, I don't think that print is quite right. If I do, we tweak it. When asked about pumping up the colors in Photoshop, Parr replied, no, not at all. I just let the color look as natural as possible. But of course, flash does help saturation. Talking about the use of flash in the daylight, it is for sure one of Parr's signature techniques. When we, for example, look at his photographs from Tesco, Marks & Spencer or Iceland supermarkets, the flash helps to express the alienation which is so often trademark of these large anonymous stores. Looking at Parr's work, it is certain that we are looking at something completely different than majority of images people usually show when they want to present their portfolios. But how do you get into this type of photography? One of the first photographic jobs Parr had was photographing at Butlin's holiday camp, which was a holiday resort providing affordable holidays for ordinary British families. Parr and his friend were paid to make portraits and casual photographs for Butlin's customers. After that, they were free to do their own work. For me, it is a nice, fresh approach in times when photography is bigger than ever and we are overwhelmed with all kinds of wannabe perfect photography. This constant chase for perfect selfies, breathtaking landscapes, or polished street shots posted on the Instagram is everywhere. Even I have been victim of this trend when I filter my photographs on basis like, is this photo super beautiful or is it something no one has ever photographed? But when we try to produce those magazine-like photographs, we end up exactly with that, cliché magazine-type photographs. More they try to look new and amazing, more ordinary they do, in my opinion. Now, not to say Parr's photographs are not top quality photographs, and I wouldn't dare to criticize Parr's work with my experience. What I mean is that when I saw his images, I was able to appreciate how you can create art basically anywhere you live. You don't need to be an Instagram influencer traveling to exotic places to shoot amazing images. And when you think about it, it doesn't even make sense. It is your goal to make common things look interesting. In today's global age where your images are shared around the world, every location is exotic and interesting for someone living somewhere else. So don't be upset you are not living in Paris and that's why you can't shoot street photography or any type of photography, because the place you live is just boring. I think, and Parr's photographs are a great example of this, that any place can be amazing, and if you truly like photography, it doesn't really matter where you live. He has shown to other photographers and photography audience how to look at the world differently. Parr also made several films which you can, by the way, find on his website, and you can see clips from some of his films there. The documentary films consist of dialogues with his subjects he photographed and are a nice trip back to late 90s and early 2000s. I would say the style of the website nicely complements his work. You will see what I mean once you visit it. Parr started Martin Parr Foundation, which opened in 2017 in Bristol, where he lives. The aim of the foundation is to preserve the archives of Martin Parr, hold a growing collection of works by selected British and Irish photographers, and house an expanding library of British and Irish photo books. The foundation has a gallery and library with more than 5,000 books by both British and Irish photographers, as well as complete back catalogues of important publications such as Creative Camera and Camera Work for educational and research purposes. However, Parr is also an object collector. He collects postcards, but also some, let's say, unusual objects. He refers to them as sheer madness. To better understand what he means by that, just take a look at this example of Saddam Hussein's watch collection. If you are more interested in that, I would recommend Parr's book Objects from 2008. Martin Parr is also a member of prestigious Magnum Photos, an international photography cooperative with some of the most well-known photographers. Founded by legendary photographers such as Robert Capa, David Seymour, Amir Cartier-Bresson, George Roger, or William van der Wert. Just to give you an idea how hard it is to become a member, it actually takes 4 years to become a full-fledged member since the time you become a nominee. Members gather once per year to vote on potential new members, and they usually accept just 1 or 2 photographers. Now, the interesting thing is it wasn't actually easy for Parr to join, as some of the members of more conservative wing within Magnum were against it. However, he was eventually able to get a 2/3 required to be a member by 1 vote and joined in 1994. In 2014, Parr was actually voted in as a president of the Magnum Photos International, a post he held for 3.5 years until 2017. Martin Parr is currently working on a new show and book about his images from Ireland for autumn 2020. If you want to find out more about what is Martin Parr currently up to, you can check out all of his events on his website. I will leave the link in the description. You can also buy Martin Parr's books on his website, where you can also buy signed copies. Parr also runs a YouTube channel where he interviews his colleague photographers, and I have to say it is one of my favorite channels, so definitely check it out. I will leave the link in the description. As Walt Williams says in Martin Parr's retrospective, which I have reviewed a few weeks ago, Parr's photography is essentially a reflection of intense curiosity. It is uncomfortable because in many ways it brings out the worst in us, makes us scornful or silly, snobbish or cynical. In the same way, his photographs are a kind of practical joke, seemingly harmless but destined to cause us to make fool of ourselves. Thank you for watching.